Good morning or good afternoon to everyone today. Thank you so much for joining us. Sorry we're a little bit late, but Rick and I like to catch up. And it's been a week of Mondays for me, so I'm super glad to have a webinar with him today so I can just sit back, relax, and listen. But today Rick is talking about single source of truth, product management for all environments. As y'all know, I like to take a moment and just touch on some housekeeping items as we get started. The first and most important slide to share with you, of course, is the user group officers. I can't really put into words how grateful I am to have this team and to be able to have worked with them for as long as I have. They are incredible leaders. I've learned so much and I continue to learn from each one of them. So huge thank you to Sam, Tim, Ted, Mike, and Tony for everything they do for the group. Obviously, we were at Insights in May. We've got Connect coming up in August, but there are so many other projects that they're working on to represent the group. So if you have a moment, it would mean the world to me if you'd send them a quick note of thanks. They can be reached at officers@p21WW.org. And of course, when I talk about the officers and I talk about Connect, it is a reminder that there is still time to register for Connect. If you go on the user group forum at the top right-hand corner of the screen, you'll see the Connect 2023 logo. If you click on that, that brings you over to our little mini site with all the information you need, including the agenda, session descriptions, listing of all the sponsors that you can enjoy and visit while you're there, but also registration and hotel information is there on that site too. For those of you who have been trying to register and also book your hotel, yes, we did sell out of hotel rooms. I just signed back another agreement to add rooms, so we should see that change in the next 24 hours. So if you don't see any availability today, please check back tomorrow or even later this evening, and you should see those rooms start to come into our inventory. Although I'm not worried about SQL statements today, because I know, of course, we're in good hands with Rick, a reminder that we do have to cover this disclaimer slide to remind everyone that all the information that you receive, whether it's during these webinars or on the user group forum, that all of that information is being shared in a volunteer capacity, and we ask that you take the information in the spirit in which it's being offered. Always use your Play database and test anything you learn either on the forums or in the webinars. Make sure you're testing before going live. Talk to the necessary IT professionals within your organization, the presenters of the session, others on the user group forum, or of course Epicor if you have any questions. Lastly, of course, my contact information is up on the screen. I'm here really as a resource for information regarding Connect or Profit 21 or the user group. If you have questions, you're not really sure where to start, please reach out to me. That's what I'm here for. Literally, I've been asked every question over the years. I don't always know the answers, but I can always find someone who does. So please don't sit wondering, just send me that email. I am very hard to get a hold of by phone right now as we're getting closer to Connect, only just less than 8 weeks out. I apologize for that, but if you email me, I do try to get back within the same day the best that I can. So I'm going to pass screen control over to Rick, and while he gets his screen ready, just a reminder about questions today. Please be sure to put them in as you think about them and using the question feature here in GoToWebinar. That helps us keep it all together. We will make sure that we have time for questions. We've got a couple of polls as we go, and we'll take some natural pauses to catch up on any questions you may have. But without further ado, Rick, I can see your screen. It looks great, so I will pass this over to you.
Sounds great. Thanks, Cheryl. First of all, everybody, thank you for taking the time to listen to this topic. This is actually one of the more exciting topics that I've done in a long time, and hopefully my passion kind of shows on that. For those of you that are on the recordings, I appreciate you taking the time. Also, for those that are not able to make it today, the only difference is if you have any questions, please feel free to email me. I'll have my contact information at the end of it to let me know if you have any questions during the presentation. One of the things Cheryl knows about me is that I end up talking too fast in these things, and we end up getting through a lot faster than I planned on. So I'm going to try and slow it down a little bit, try to take a little slower, try not to talk like I'm doing a machine gun to you, and hopefully spend some time going through some topics that maybe you've thought about, maybe you haven't thought about, and actually what I'm hoping to do is try to create a little bit of a paradigm shift for you. Without further ado, let me go to the next slide. What I'm going to do is a little bit of an introduction for who I am, who the company Gray Wolf Systems is. I'm then going to spend some time talking about concepts, and this is a newer topic. It's near and dear to my heart for the future, and I'm going to spend some time talking about those concepts, and then I'm going to walk through a real world example. One of the things I have on here is that the questions would be last. I have found that if I do the questions last, not everybody hears it because people have appointments that they need to go to or whatever. So Cheryl, if you have any questions that you think are important, need to be interrupted, please feel free. Go ahead, just interrupt me and we'll take the questions as we go. We got plenty of time for this webinar, so that shouldn't be a problem to be able to be interrupted on that. But if you want, you can also put in the questions at the end. A little bit of a background. Some of you, I don't know who's on the call, but some of you may have heard of Gray Wolf Systems. Some of you may have heard of myself. We've been around the P21 world for quite a while now. In fact, Cheryl and I were just talking about that, of all the different conferences we've been going to, even through the pandemic. And actually, we hit our 30th anniversary last November. So we've been in business for over 30 years. The background I have is I actually came from wholesale distribution. My dad was an auto parts distributor, and then I ended up working in the aerospace industry after getting my engineering degree and working in California and Colorado for General Dynamics, Martin Marietta, but got back involved with the distribution industry when I started selling another ERP solution back in 1990. So I've been actually in the industry for many moons and have a lot of experience, and that's kind of what we're going to be talking a little bit about, is some of the experience and where is the industry gone, where should the industry be going, and what should be the focal point of where you move on. One of the things we've been seeing recently is that we've seen some of the distributors start to sit on their hands a little bit on some of the projects. And I think that's a little bit of due to the unrest. We got out of the pandemic, and we're starting to see people to hold off on projects. They're saying, okay, where do we see the industry going? Where do we see the economy going? What's going to happen? Or is there a recession coming? All those kinds of discussions are causing a lot of people to sit on their hands a little bit. And hopefully in this conversation today, I can bring some of that experience and talk to you a little bit about what we've seen, where we see things going, and those kinds of things. To know a little bit better about who you are, at least those of you on the call, I've asked Cheryl to give us 3 questions. So Cheryl, if you can kind of just, start putting those out there for me, I'd appreciate it. The first one is, what's your job function? I just kind of want to know if I'm dealing with, and I can say this being an engineer, how many of you are propeller heads? How many people of you are beam counters? How many people of you are just management people? I'd like to kind of know what your background is. So we'll go through that. Cheryl, when you get fairly close, go ahead and do the results, and we'll go on to the next one.
Yeah, we'll give everyone just another minute. We're at about 70% have come in and voted. So.
Okay. In the meantime, where we're going to be going with this conversation is I'm hoping to be a little bit of all the above. So hopefully everybody that's in this listing here will get something out of this. It's not meant just for the computer guys. It's not just meant for the buyers. It's not meant for just the sales guys. It's meant to cross over all the lines.
So Rick, I'm not sure if you can see that.
I can see that. Yep, I can. Perfect. So it looks like the lion's share is management, which is good. And then obviously we've got some guys like myself that are propeller heads, and we don't have some of the guys that are glad handers as much. The sales guys, I resemble that remark, so I understand where you guys are coming from. Let's do the next one, please.
Okay, so this is, how do you currently handle product management?
Correct.
Yes.
So to answer this question a little bit, product management, I'm going to get into product management. Don't worry too much about how you answer this, in the sense that we're going to start to define some of these things and look into that. But based on your knowledge of product management today, how do you actually do that, or do you do it? Okay, and realistically, we are going to hit again a lot of these things and talk through that. So if I can get a feel for where you are on that, And oh, by the way, if you don't know what PIM means, that's by design, because if you don't know what it means, I don't want you to answer it. I don't want to explain it to you and say, oh yeah, we have that. That's kind of what I expected. That's almost exactly what I expected. So for those of you that aren't seeing it, just kind of recount, the lion's share is basically you put it into P21 or you just don't do it. All right, let's do the last one, please.
Okay, hold on one sec. All right.
There we go. So what I mean by touch points on this is how do your customers get information on your products? In other words, are they getting it through a website? Are they getting it from sales reps? Are they getting it, through EDI because you're just doing all EDI with them? How do you actually get the information on products, whether it be price, availability, or attributes, things like size or measurements? How do you get that information to your customers, or how do they receive it from you is what I'm trying to achieve here. And oh, by the way, if you didn't notice, this is a multiple choice, so it's not like you're just picking one.
Yeah, you can choose more than one for this one, yeah. That threw me off for a second because 100% just said inside, outside sales rep. I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh, I forgot that's what I did. Okay,
Yep.
hold on.
Perfect. And again, not a surprise here. I am a little surprised by the e-commerce website. That's a little higher than I expected, but I'm not surprised that 100% of you have inside and outside sales reps. That's the standard process. Great, thanks, Cheryl. If you can throw it back, perfect.
Yeah.
All right, so since we've gone through these poll questions, here's something that I found kind of interesting that ties into that a little bit. Now, this is a little old. This came from McKinsey back in 2019. And what they did is they asked, what is the most important element of dealing with a distributor for your customers? And the funny part about it is what they were keying on is that price is number 6. So in other words, range of products, product availability were the top. And this is a cumulative thing. If you add it up, it actually ends up being about 98% or 99% or whatever. But you can see the importance from McKinsey of that, the fact that range of products, product availability, and then customer service, you can read the rest of them, are all more important than trying to compete on price, where we all think that price and availability are the biggest things they're looking at. So while you have that kind of a world that you're dealing with, that price is important, you don't want to get caught up in that. You don't want to get lost in the fact that price is the number one thing that you're dealing with. Now, that same sense, there was a couple, 3 years later, McKinsey did another study and had some things and said, okay, category management. And oh, by the way, we're going to take category management, we're going to say product management, and kind of make them the same, at least for our discussions here, because I'm going to have another slide here that actually takes it out of this. And they say, what is holding customers back, or sorry, distributors back? And that is, there's a growing complexity of customer requirements. Now, this is fairly new. This is about a year old, which in today's day and age, anything post-pandemic is all new. There's a growing complexity of requirements. There's a expanding depth and breadth of product assortments. Inflationary factor, which we all know that, even with the fact that the Fed's been raising rates and now they just stopped and held, but we're still seeing inflationary numbers. And a talent gap and rising expectations for category managers or product managers. And we're going to get into what does that mean being a product manager. But I did want to move on to this slide. This was probably, and you can read it, I'm going to kind of talk through it and bring up some of the bullet points, but this was probably the biggest piece of that whole article that really made my head spin a little bit. And if you look at this and primarily look in the center piece here, if you say category managers, what they mean by category managers, product category managers or product managers, that they need to be much more than the buyers. Now, I know a lot of you are managers, and we didn't have a lot of buyers necessarily in here. We had some, but it's not about just being buyers familiar with the industry, but you need to be able to be analytical, commercial savvy, customer-centric view on products, being able to take in the category strategies of assortment and pricing. Pricing was only a small piece of it. It's range of products. It's this whole concept of being a holistic design that you need to be working with as a product manager. That you're not just working with the idea of what price should I be charging for this, or even necessarily how much should I be buying, using the old Gordon Graham concepts and min-max and all that kind of stuff. And I love it. Don't get me wrong. John Schreibfeder is a good friend of mine, and I think all the concepts of inventory management is important, but it's beyond that. It's got to be bigger than that. And this article talks about that, saying that you've got to bring in all these different pieces so that they can be in the best position for products to drive growth. That's where we're trying to get to, is because we're seeing things are getting a little quiet. Now, a little bunny trail here I want to talk about is there was a content status came up with this other study, and it's a Monday morning quarterback. So they call it Cyber Monday report. And what it basically is it's looking back on how did things work in the e-commerce world, because a lot of you are saying you're getting your touch points are with e-commerce to your customers. How is that working? And we recognize some of these names, comparing it to Walmart, Home Depot, Amazon, Nordstrom. And one of the things I found interesting, and by the way, we can bring up this whole report. If you send me an email, I'll send you a copy of the PDF of this report. But what I found interesting here is that 87% of the people buying, the consumers, say product page content is very important or critical to their purchase decision. So if your touch points are e-commerce, which, oh, by the way, we have an e-commerce solution. We're going to talk a little bit about that to some degree. And, oh, by the way, that's your touch point to your buyers, and your product page content is not accurate, up to date, current, visually stimulating. They're saying 87% are going to go someplace else. And imagine for the same thing goes for your sales reps. If you're talking about inside outside sales reps, they've got to have that same product information of what the attributes are and what's the specs on the products, making sure all that is out there available for them. So I'd like to pose a concept. I want to stay a whole new paradigm. Let's wipe the slate clean. Let's take what we've been doing and turn it on its head. So I'm going to walk through a new paradigm, and you guys just hit the nail on the head when you're going through this of your product management. The world revolves around Profit 21. And I know that this may be a little insulting to some of you, and especially those of you that are the Profit 21 system administrators or are responsible for it. And Profit 21 is the end all beat all. If it doesn't interface with Profit 21, I don't want to talk to it. If it doesn't work around it, everything, the world revolves around Profit 21, whether it be marketplaces like Amazon or Wayfair. And oh, by the way, we work with a lot of those marketplaces with our customers, and that's growing more and more, that they want to interface with those kinds of industry or those kinds of players in the world. And those marketplaces have been around for a while with Coupa and some other things. Or are you wanting to deal with trading partners, things in the EDI world that you're doing lights out? By the way, when I say EDI, I'm not talking just ANSI X12. I'm talking any kind of documents, PDFs, Excel spreadsheets, and you're wanting to send that information to trading partners. Or you want to take that information, you're going to put it into your catalog or your e-commerce. These are all satellite elements to Profit 21. So if you work in the world of P21, I am posing, and this is where I'm trying to get to. This is the nut of the whole presentation, is this slide right here. I'm going to change and say, because you're wholesale distributors, and oh, by the way, been there, done that. In fact, my dad was in town. He's 85 years old. He's an auto parts distributor. I have unloaded more than my fair share of hoses and belts and batteries and tires and all that kind of stuff into a warehouse. And if you get right down to it, as a distributor, the world revolves around products. You are buying and selling products, and that's where it's all revolving around. The rest of it, yes, I've heard Bruce Merrifield, I've heard Michael Marks, I've heard all those guys talk about, value add and all the other things. Yes, that's important, and I'm not saying you shouldn't continue to grow your business that way, but I truly believe that it's all about the product. And I'm going to use a couple terms interchangeably. One is called product management, and one is called product marketing management. And that's what I want to talk a little bit about, the distinction, spend a little time on that. But if we say it all revolves around the product, and oh, by the way, Profit 21 happens to be the transactions of that product, and if that's the way we're going to to be working this is that Profit 21 just happens to be a satellite to the product, and it's on the same level as e-commerce and marketplaces and trading partners. Then if we revolve around the product, then we've got to make sure that we are getting all the right information on that product into one location, and we turn it and we push it out to all the other things, and we disseminate it to the other pieces that are important for those other touch points, because these touch points are important. Don't get me wrong. Having, you know, your e-commerce solution, or having maybe you're going through Amazon and selling things that way, those are still important, but that the product is the key, not Profit 21. Now, I know that can be heresy, but let's work off of that premise for right now. So what's the difference between a product manager and a product marketing manager? And this came from a guy that's been doing some things out there. And I'm going to let you read this real quick here. And it talks about the differences where in the strategy arena and the tactics and the metrics and the focus. And a product manager is focused really on the products. And realistically, if I really narrow this down, a product manager fits really well for the manufacturers or your suppliers. It works really well that they're working on the product strategy for building a design of the product. Now, writing specs and developing the product and the prototypes isn't really what a wholesale distributor typically does. Maybe you're doing some of that, but realistically, a product manager is more on the manufacturing side, and a product marketing manager is more on what you do. Because if you look at this, this is where you're trying to figure out the segments, you're trying to figure out the marketing campaigns, you're trying to figure out how you push them into the distribution channels of which you are, but the channels in this case are talking about like website, search, social media. So when I say product manager in a distribution world, I'm probably really talking about product marketing manager. But for our discussions today, I'd like to make them interchangeable. Because if you look at this in a Venn diagram kind of an approach, you're going to see that really there's a lot of similarities between the two. That's this light purple area. But some of the things that are like driving engineering and designers and specs and documentation, you're going to be getting that from your suppliers. Market sizing, positioning, messaging, steering the market, those kinds of things are really where we're talking about those pieces. So if we move on a little bit more, and I found an article out there that was, or actually it's a book that says, okay, what's product marketing? And it says which products are going to be offered, breadth and depth of a product line. You know, if you're a buyer and you're trying to figure out what product lines to carry, you are doing product marketing. Who will be the target markets? Are you going to segment it? I've got customers that have both heating and air conditioning, as well as plumbing, as well as electrical. As a general rule, you're not selling to the same target market with those three different industries, but you may. And you've got to figure out, how do you figure out those segments, and how do you figure out which products belong in those segments? We're working on an e-commerce solution with our Altitude product today with a company called National Energy out of Canada, and they sell everything that goes boom. They sell things from furnaces and fireplaces as well as gas pumps, and they sell primarily almost all of Costco's gas pumps and all the things that are related to their gas stations. They sell that. Well, there's some issues there because they sell what goes boom. They've got to figure out what the market segments are, because they have to have authorization to be able to sell to them, because there's some regulations that go on to prevent people from just being able to buy it off the street. So you've got to figure out those things. And if you figure it out at a product level and put together a product management tool and then disseminate that information to the appropriate places, that makes it easier than saying, I'm going to put it into a transaction system, I'm going to put it into an e-commerce system, I'm going to put it into wherever. I need to maybe put it into my product marketing position. With that being said, before we kind of jump into some more of the meat, would you please put the other poll up for me, please, Cheryl? This is the last poll, by the way.
I forgot that we had one more. Hold on one
I just put you to sleep, didn't I, Cheryl?
Not at all. I was listening. All right, you should see it up right now.
Okay, so from a organizational perspective, do you have a person or group who does the product, and I put in this case because I can put it out there now, product marketing management or product management? Do you have somebody that does this? Now, I had fun with this when I was putting this question together, and Cheryl wouldn't let me do it because she had a limitation on how many answers I could have. One of my other answers was, yes, I have a college intern who does this. Oh, by the way, we have dealt with companies. In fact, it's a P21 customer out of Texas. They were doing their e-commerce site, and who was doing their product management was a was an owner's son who was an intern, was doing all the product marketing for their e-commerce site. So while it was kind of tongue in cheek, it really was going on. Okay, I wish I'd had the more than the other, but I find that interesting. So what you're telling me is you don't have a product manager role. Go ahead and you can take that off for me, please, Cheryl. You don't really have a product manager role. You don't have somebody doing what we're talking about. And if you agree with my concept, my premise, that the world revolves around the product, not revolves, I'll bet if I asked the same question up there and said, do you have somebody responsible for Profit 21? You'd all say, yes, we have someone who's responsible for that. They have a role that Profit 21 is their cornerstone responsibility. But you don't have one for products, which I argue is what you're in business for. You're not in business to do Profit 21, you're in business to buy and sell products. So if that's the case, and if you buy into what I'm saying, and hopefully you do at this point, but if you buy into what I'm saying, let's walk through a real world example. And again, I know this is going to sound salesy, but that's not the intent. I'm trying to show you and will show you what can be done. It doesn't have to be our solution. It's just the one I'm going to show. But if we take those same planets going around the sun and we use Keystone as the product management, I'm going to be showing you that. And we have Altitude, which is our e-commerce solution, which integrates with P21 and is based off of the Magento environment. And you use Partner Connect for your EDI, and you use marketplaces like Amazon and Wayfair and all the other ones, and you have Profit 21 out there. That's the scenario I'm talking about using. And oh, by the way, that company I was talking about that's in Texas, that's running Profit 21, they had been using an intern for that. They are one of our first customers on Keystone, and they're buying into this concept that where everything revolves around the product management. So they're working and spending most of their time now in improving and getting their product management in place before they start worrying about their e-commerce solution. Because, oh, by the way, they also happen to be an Altitude customer of ours, but their website's not very good because it's not about the product. They've been doing it from a marketing perspective. They've been doing the about us, and they've been doing about what vendors do we carry and what's our history and all that kind of fun stuff. A product brochure is not what you're in anymore. You can't be in that and survive. You've got to be able to sell the products. You've got to get into things like SEO on your products. So when someone does a search for a given product, it finds your website, and you've got to make sure all the metadata is appropriate in that. And if you have a product management tool, that's the way it plays nice. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's get into a demonstration here. So let's see if I can move this. I can't, so hang on, let's get rid of that. I'll come back to that, and I'm going to go into a live demo. All right, make sure that shows up on the screen. Oh, by the way, this is our website, and you're going to find all of our pricing. Everything is out there, and I'm going to be talking about this product management piece. I'm not going to go into the sales pitch of that, but this is the piece I'm talking about. We happen to do EDI as well. That's our Partner Connect, and we do e-commerce, which, oh, by the way, happens to be based on Magento, and specifically Magento 2. Well, with that being said, I would imagine all of you have, with your suppliers, are getting spreadsheets, and these are a sample of several of them that we've gotten. That let's go look at this one right here. This is a data sample that we got, and this happened to be an Excel spreadsheet that we got from a P21 customer that has things like, I'm going to expand all these out, and it has things like what's the SKU, what's the brand, it's got a description on it, it's got all the product information from the manufacturer. It also includes, and I want to talk a little bit about this, it includes a CDN, which is a content provider. So instead of the images actually being downloaded and put into your e-commerce solution, you put it in as a URL and that you point to it. So when the image changes out on the CDN, in this case, Kiteclo is the CDN provider, that when those images change, it automatically changes dynamically. So I'm assuming all of you can get a spreadsheet that looks something like this. And maybe you don't have one that looks like that. Maybe it ends up being one that looks like this. And again, we've got several of them that are out there. This one's a little bit different. So this has an energy price list. It includes pricing. It includes whether it includes freight or not. All similar kind of information, but not exactly the same. Well, what we've done is we've said if you can take your information and get it into a standard format of a spreadsheet. Now this is the standard format of it, where you have a SKU, you have a name, you have a description, and some basic information into it. This is what we're going to work off of. Now, we could work off of the other spreadsheets and we could map them out to bring them in to our system, specifically Keystone, but we've chosen to say, most people understand Excel. So we're going to let you work in that world and modify the data to fit this world. So you'll recognize a lot of these products here in a minute. So if I've got this spreadsheet, and again, I'm going to show one more last one, and that's trade service. If you don't have a manufacturer that can provide this to you, and maybe that's not working out well from that perspective, one of the things we've been talking to trade service about is the same kind of concept. This is a spreadsheet that they have, which, oh, by the way, happens to have a lot of the same information, has columns across the top. You can just copy and paste to put in. It includes some things. I'm going to copy one of this. I'm going to take this image link and copy it, because I'm going to use that later. So I just did a Control-C on it. I'm going to take that trade service image link and now work inside of Keystone for our product management. So I'm going to log in. And again, it's a new paradigm. So I want you to kind of think through how this works, in the sense that one of the things I can do, you'll recognize a lot of these products that are listed here were in that spreadsheet. Just as a quick refresher, they're right here. So we have an 820018 and so forth down the road. If I minimize that back down, you'll see it's on a different page. So bear with me here. I'm going to go to a different page. I can go and find some of these other ones. There's a whole bunch of these products that are out there. Now, how did I get them in there? I just clicked on the Keystone link and said spreadsheet products import. And that imported that spreadsheet, brought in all kinds of specifications, brought in all kinds of details on it. And oh, by the way, we want to look at some of those. So let's go in here and look. So some of the basic information is I have a SKU, I have a name, I have some details associated with it, maybe a list price. I have P21 information, selling information, default sales group, default sales pricing unit, purchasing. I have some other fields that you'll recognize in the P21 world. I have all kinds of pieces, including supplier costs and prices in a one-to-many relationship with this product. So if I have multiple suppliers, when I look back at that spreadsheet, I have the ability to look over here that some of these have multiple suppliers for a given product, so that I can have that true relationship in here working off of this environment that I'm working in, including maybe units of measure, and I can have multiples of those. I can have warehouse product information, so what location ID, what's the safety stock. I can have all my P21 information here. Now, you're probably thinking, well, that's great, but I've got all this information already in P21. I don't want to have to rekey that information back in. Well, guess what? One of the things we have is we can go to P21, go to products, and I can get the products. I can go pull from P21, pull that information in, and populate the same database with that information. Now, you obviously see push, we're going to get there. And we do the same thing with Magento. Maybe you've got a Magento site out there already. I can go and get all the products that are already on my Magento site. It synchronizes it all into one place that I can manage in. The really cool part about this is as I make modifications, I can even see the version changes, and I can preview and see what changed as I'm walking through this. So I have versioning of all my product information. Oh, by the way, here's that little caveat. What's a PIM? That stands for Product Information Management. That's the latest buzzword for technology, is a PIM that has this. Oh, by the way, this happens to be based upon PIMcore. PIMcore, if you look it up, is one of the leading PIM solutions out there. There's Akeneo, there's InRiver, there's a lot of other companies out there. We have selected PIMcore as our architecture for it, because now we can make this all look the way we want it to look, including more generic things like measurements or related products. So I can go and start assigning products that maybe they become an upsell. Oop, that one failed. I love when that happens in a demo. Or I can drag and drop for cross-sell or supersede. And I can have categories. Oh, this happens to be the categories on a website. Well, let's pop over here and look at the website. Here's the categories: product lineup, accessories. I have categories associated with it that I can work off of to say, here's my default category, here's my all the H series. I can control my categories even in here. I can control attributes in here, assign all these things to a given product, and then I can push it to the appropriate places, whether it be P21. Ultimately, where we're going to go to is maybe Amazon, maybe it's going to go to Wayfair, all the different places we're going to use those APIs and push those to those other places. As well as what a term out there is called DAM, which is digital asset management. Well, one of the things I've done is I've already brought in several of these items, and I can hover over and see the different, and by the way, DoSend's kind of fun. I enjoy doing these robotics because it's kind of a sexy product set. But I can right click and say add assets, and then I can upload files. I can bring it from a zip file if I want to, or I can even import it from a URL. Bring all those in, and once I get those in, I have two types of images out there. I'm going to delete that one. I have local images so that I can specify and take this one, make it into the main image. I can take this one, make it into the thumbnail image, and if I want to add more images to it, I just keep adding images to this product. I can add videos to it. Actually, let me go back real quick on images. One of the other things I can do is that whole concept of external images. Now, I should be able to just do a paste, and oh, by the way, if you notice, it gives me a preview of that item, and I can look at that item while I'm looking at the product at the same time, even though it's a URL. One of the things that Magento doesn't do natively is to have this push automatically. We've written with Keystone to upgrade Magento so that this URL now becomes part of that product information. So if I look over here now, and this is the administrative tool, log in real quick, and while that's logging in, I can type. While that's logging in, I can see from the administrative perspective, the same thing over here. If I go to the, nope, I didn't want to go that one. I want to go to the H series. Sorry, clicked too fast. So if I go to product offerings, come on, pop up for me. Let's go home. By the way, this is a demo site. This is not a live site, just for everybody's knowledge. Well, one of the things I'm going to see in the products, I'm going to go here as opposed to the others. I can actually see the product, and when I go into the product, I can actually see the description. I can see multiple images associated with that, and that happens to be a different product out here, the H. Let's go over here. This is the H2515, and if I go look at the images, you're going to see these are the images related to it. If I were to modify that, or say modify the description, these are all the descriptions going into, or change the list price. When I click on here and say Magento products push, it would update all these products that are in the actual Magento backend. And that's where I'm coming in here, is that's actually the same piece that I'm seeing right here going into it. So the bottom line is, do you really want your product managers to be in an e-commerce solution? This is an e-commerce solution management tool. Do you really, if your touch point is giving that product information to your customers through your e-commerce, I would rather have my product managers be in here working in the products as we're going through, including videos maybe, including maybe data sheets, of which I can bring those attachments and data sheets and look at those here and drag and drop them in. Those become then spec sheets on your website. I think I'd rather have them working in here, because one of the other kind of cool things I can do if I really want to get sophisticated is I get a product like this. This actually happens to be a mini Photoshop kind of a tool. So I can actually start putting things on here, and I can maybe add and fill in some places, or I can use a paintbrush, or I can add text to this and add text to it, save it. That image is now saved in my product management tool in Keystone. saving that information all in one place and pushing it from here to the appropriate places, as opposed to having little islands of automation. I have it one central location that's associated with it. The other cool part about all this is that I can have all this so that not only is it for an e-commerce, but I can have it pushed to P21. And I haven't logged in. I probably should have. I apologize. But what you can see when you log into P21 is that pricing information. So if we go back to the starting point on this, and I'm working here off of the spreadsheet, now this content is, and that's, if you talk to most people, in fact, I'm going to be doing a presentation at the conference on how do you get e-commerce up and running now. Well, how do you get it going and how do you get moving forward? The biggest stumbling block to getting your e-commerce site up and running is actually getting the content in there. And where are you going to get your content? Well, again, let's go back to the idea that you're typically not manufacturing. You may create kits. You may have some light assembly that you've got going on, but you're really not a manufacturing organization. Now, if you are, different discussion, we can talk about that as well. But as a general rule, most Profit 21 users are buying and selling stuff. So you're getting that information, that content's coming from the manufacturers. You can even go, oh, by the way, one of the things, this image that I've got right here, I'm going to close it out so I don't save it, but this image that I have right here, I uploaded fairly straightforward. All I had to do was I went to a website, and you can do the same thing. You can go to any website. Let's go to 3M for argument's sake. And we go over to their website, and they've got product information, and you go into the product, and we'll just pick a couple of them. Let's keep going down in. And as I get a product, I can right click and say copy the image. When I've copied that image, I may want to, or actually let's just save it as a file. It doesn't like WebP, I'm going to default. I can convert that to a JPEG, but once I save it as a JPEG, all I have to do is come over here and say right click and say add the asset, upload the file. I've got all the images I want associated with the product. So the content management, the content of making your website and or P21 and or Amazon and or Granger and or wherever, all that content, you can manage and get it quickly and easily into this world. And if you get to a point that you say, hey, I want to manage this in bulk, which I'm sure some of you are thinking right now, I can actually manage all these products associated with it. I can change what the grid options are and specify what content and what columns I want to have. So I can say, okay, what columns do I want? What export do I want? And if I want to bulk change, so I could go and select a handful of these and say, I want these to be changed. I can right click on these and say, change, say batch edit selected. And I can change all those from yes to no and save. And those now are all changed in a mass update perspective. Now I know some of you are using the scheduled importer. I know you guys, some are using the data importer. But again, I come back to which tool should this be? Should the world revolve around P21 or should the world revolve around products? I make the argument that they should revolve around products and work off of the idea that you have it all in one location, easy to use, easy for non-technical people to use, and set it up so it's easy for the sharing of that information accordingly for a buyer, a product manager, or the college intern, if you will. All right, that's my demo. Give me a second, I'm gonna go back to the PowerPoint. Let's go here. Come on, show up. Why aren't you playing nice with me now? Let's go here and try that again. There we go. All right. So I've gotten too fast again, Cheryl. I just get too excited. Hopefully we've got some questions, but in summary, pricing is the 6th on the customer's value list. It's not number 1. It's not even number 2. Price is not what you're after. It's what you're trying to do. And if you come back to that value add concept, it's the value of what's the content on your product page. That 87% of consumers want your product page content to be accurate. It needs to be current. It needs to be thorough. It needs to be all the things that they can get. We're all getting into a mode of self-service. We're all starting to work on our own. And especially if you get into the Gen Z, they want it even more because they don't want to talk to a sales rep, even though you all have 100% sales reps. Today, they're not wanting to talk to it. They're more interested in Instagram and TikTok and those kinds of things. They want to deal with their phone. They don't want to deal with human beings. Well, give it to them, but make sure it's accurate. Make sure it's current. And then one of the things that they're saying is category managers today, this is obviously from McKinsey, not on sales and suppliers are pushing, but what your needs and willingness, what the customer's needs and willingness to pay. And that's about the product information. And product managers and product marketing have similar but different roles. Depends on what you're in as far as industries and those kinds of things. But don't get hung up on the terminology. That's not the key. I truly would have to say, since none of you have a product manager, I would highly recommend, even if it's somebody that you've already got on staff, maybe just a buyer, it may be somebody that's working with vendors on a regular basis. It could be your warehouse manager or whatever. You need to have a product manager. And that the world revolves around products. It doesn't revolve around P21. And the key to this whole thing, so we're going to go full circle now. The title of this session is that you end up with a single source of truth. If you have a product management tool like Keystone, then basically you have a single truth. You have it all stored in one place. And then when you push it to your e-commerce solution, when you push it to P21, when you push it to your trading partners, when you push it to the marketplaces, it's all got the same single source of truth as opposed to different flavors of everything going out there and having different pieces and parts that are out there. We are going to be in Dallas. Looking forward to it. Cheryl and I were talking about it. I think this is going to be our, 7th or 8th year that we've been there, excluding the ones where we couldn't go. Obviously, a booth is to be determined at this point, and we are looking forward to hopefully seeing you. I would love to take someone and have a beer and talk about this. If you disagree with what I'm saying, which I'm sure some of you do, if you disagree with it, I'd love to talk to you about it. I'd love to get your feedback on it because, quite honestly, I'm in the process of a draft of a white paper. Maybe hopefully it'll be an article of this whole concept that the world revolves around products. The world doesn't revolve around the ERP. And that's what I'm going to start working on. And I'd love to get some feedback because maybe I need to tweak that a little bit. This is my vital information. Feel free to email me, call me, go to our website. Everything I've been talking about is on our website, except for the obviously white paper, but all those pieces and parts are on the website. And I'd love to hear from anybody that disagrees. And if you do agree and like to get more information, please let me know. But I'd really like to have a discussion on this with those of you that don't think it works. With that, Cheryl, I've got it down to 10 minutes before.
You were actually a little bit slower than usual. I think the extra poll kind of broke your stride. I always get a little worried when I'm watching the clock. We do have one question, and just going back a slide, your booth 5.
Oh, I am.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Great.
Your
Thanks. Everybody knows at the same time I do. I love it. Thanks.
Sorry, I thought I said that too.
Oh, that's cool. No, that's great. Booth 5.
Yeah,
Got it.
booth 5. The one question here we have is Keystone a product of Grey Wolf, and does it integrate with other e-commerce systems?
So that's a great question, first of all, and I'm glad you asked because I didn't know how much people would want to hear this. A little history. Altitude is a product of ours as well. Altitude is our e-commerce solution, and we made the decision. We charge $180 a month as a subscription to our Altitude product. And the reason why we are so affordable as opposed to $20, $30, $40,000 up front with another, if you look at Magento Commerce, it's $20,000 a year. The reason we're able to do that is because it's based on an open source architecture of Magento. And then we take that open source code, ideally try to not modify it, we try to enhance it. And that's where we use our connector piece for P21 to integrate with it so that we are able to add things like pricing and availability, real-time pricing, availability, and orders. I go down that bunny trail for a reason, because that's the same model that we've gone with Keystone. Keystone is based off of the PIM core, and I would suggest you look it up, and if you can't find it, go to our website. It's PIMCORE. They're out of Europe. They developed a solution that's also open source, and we based it off of their architecture. You could do the same thing we've done, quite honestly. But what we've done is we've taken that architecture and then wrapped around it all the things you're seeing from a user interface perspective to make it easier. Because I'm a believer that the right role of person that should be using this needs a user interface. If they're a buyer, they're not technical. They're not going to want to know how to do things. They're going to want to know how to use things. And so we developed it on PIMcore. If for whatever reason PIMcore were to stop development or whatever, there's a term out there called forking it. We would fork out of that, and we would then continue on the base and only make modifications. So we have all the source code to PIMcore if we need to. We have then made our product out of that, and we have written our original integrations based upon the APIs that we know today. So for example, we know P21, we know SX from Infor, we know CSD from Infor, we know Magento because that's our altitude product. Those are the pieces we've done. If another e-commerce solution, so for example, one of the things we're looking at, we have a customer of ours today that we're using our Partner Connect EDI. We are doing an inventory inquiry, an 846 EDI document to Shopify. And we're doing that today already. One of the things I want to do is to take and put Keystone going to Shopify. So that would be another example of another e-commerce solution. And we know Shopify's APIs to do that. So I guess it kind of depends on which e-commerce solution you're talking about. If you're talking about things like BigCommerce or Shopify or some of the others, the answer is we can absolutely do it. I would probably do some cost sharing with you because we would get some benefit out of that if it's a mainstream one. If it's a very unique one or a homegrown one, then it would obviously be billable. But because we have access to all the code and can do all the things we want, there is absolutely no issues whatsoever to integrate to other e-commerce solutions besides, say, Magento. We're not holding you hostage with only our solution. That's not the idea. And in fact, I would rather sell you Keystone over Altitude if I had to choose, not because of any other reason than I truly believe that Keystone, and there's a reason the name Keystone came about. I think Keystone's going to become the cornerstone to the industry as time goes on. So a long answer to a short question. The answer is we don't have any today, but depending upon which e-commerce solution, we would be able to do it either very, very quickly on their API solutions that they have, or take a little time and have to maybe develop some APIs to do it, but we would be able to do it depending on which one it is. What else, Cheryl?
Next question. Do we need to match the fields or attributes before pushing the information from back end to front end?
Today, the answer is yes, because we've had a product, still sell it, but we aren't throwing any research and development dollars into it. It's called NewSync. You'll see it on our website. We've got a lot of customers still using it. NewSync was based off of the premise of doing mass updates. For all practical purposes, think of scheduled importer. The idea was, do we map to different spreadsheets and different fields in spreadsheets, and then bring it in and do the one-to-one relationships, or not necessarily one-to-one, but the mapping process, do it at the solution level, in that case, NewSync, or do we say map it out in a spreadsheet and then we'll bring in that one spreadsheet? We have found over history, so NewSync's been around for, I think, 15, 20 years, something like that. We have found that it's easier for the users, especially the non-technical users, to map to a standard spreadsheet and then use the spreadsheet to map to the tool. In that case, it was going to say P21 or to SX or whatever. In this case, it's going to be going to Keystone. We have some technology on it that we can actually do the mapping a lot easier now. So if it's really a heartache for you to do that, we could do it. But we have found this is not a technical issue. This is purely a procedural and paradigm issue, that we have found that working in the Excel world and mapping there is easier and more efficient than going the other way. But could we do it the other way? We could. We would just have to have a serious discussion on why we'd want to do it that way.
Okay, next question. Actually have good time for questions today. How often do you get or push information to P21?
Another great question. Today we're doing it manually. So the concept was that we would have the product manager make that decision. So the underlying, I'm going to get under the covers and share a little bit of the dirty laundry. When we push to Magento, P21, or wherever we're pushing it to, the architecture of that is to push all of those that have been modified. So, and assuming that those flags, like I just showed you, do you send it to ERP? Do you send it to Magento? That kind of stuff. If those flags are yes, then we push it when you actually go through the menu items and push it. So that's a manual process today. On the roadmap is to make that into, and this, the architecture is based on LAMP, which is Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. It's based on that architecture. So we would have a potential for a cron job to do the exact same thing. The reason we haven't done that is because that could create some unusual results. So a product manager makes a change, and oh, by the way, they've saved it, but they're not quite ready for it to go. We'd have to have a flag that says, actually, it's ready to be published. Now, if one of the things I can show it, and I can take this offline as well. What you may not have seen is I had save and I had save and publish. That is a possibility we could work off of, that the save would be out there and only the save and publish would be done automated. But today, the how often answer is whenever you want to. The right answer long-term is to give you the choice to say however you want to, or on a regular scheduled basis. We just haven't had anybody ask us for that yet, but I think we're going to end up there someday. Do we have
Thank
more?
you, Rick. No, we actually don't have any more questions right now. But as Rick mentioned, he's happy to take this offline as well. So if you are watching this in a recorded format, go ahead and shoot him an email and he'll get back to you just as soon as he's able, and maybe even do a demo one-on-one, which is sometimes easier.
Yes.
Rick, is there anything else you wanted to share before we wrap up?
No, I think we're good.
We actually did good for time. You took the whole hour. I'm actually pretty excited about that. Sometimes we get through this in about 20 minutes because you just get so passionate. But we will wrap up for today as everyone's getting ready for the holiday weekend. I hope everyone has a safe 4th of July next week with family and friends and enjoy the time. We will be back to our regular webinars in about a week's time once we're done the holiday. If you have any questions, of course, about today's presentation, it has been recorded. It will be posted on the user group forum either later today or first thing tomorrow. And of course, you can check the calendar area of the user group forum for sessions that are coming up, and be sure to register for Connect because there's still time. But Rick, thank you so much for today. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in just like 6 weeks.
Sounds great, Cheryl.
Okay, take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.